Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Jacob, and today we've got another Dungeons and Dragons video for you. What we've got on going on, what we've got on going on. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. What's going on, everybody? My name's Jacob, and today we've got another Dungeons and Dragons video for you. Today's video is going to be on the races that are exclusive to the player's handbook. This is going to be for a player who has never played before or is looking to get into starting D&D. Not going over any of the way the class behaves, or like any of the lore or role-playing aspects. We're just going to go over the traits and benefits of each race. This is not a tier list, forewarned, and comprises of the race just in the player's handbook. Like I said, it's where most players start out. The best race or class is the one that you want to play and inspires you to create a backstory and delve into Dungeons and Dragons. So let's dive right in. First off, we're going to start with the Dwarf. You get an ability score increase of +2 to your constitution. You're a medium creature, about 4.5 feet tall, average about 150 pounds. A walking speed of 25 feet, and you are not burdened by heavy armor. So that's great right out of the gate. You get almost heavy armor proficiency. You get to not be burned by heavy armor. Dark vision of 60 feet. You have dwarven resilience trait. You have advantage on saving throws against being poisoned, and you are resistant to poison damage. It's really helpful for something like Tomb of Annihilation, where a lot of the characters there are either undead or whatnot and hit you with poison damage, poison saves. It's really helpful. Dwarven combat training. Proficiency with battle axe, hand axe, light hammer, and a war hammer out of the gate. You get tool proficiencies with either the smith's tools, mason's tools, or brewer supplies if you feel like making some ale. You get the stone cunning trait, which when you make a history check dealing with the origin of stonework, you double the proficiency bonus added instead of just using the normal proficiency. It makes you really into stonework. Languages. You know Common and Dwarvish. There are sub-races to the Dwarves. You'll see that pop up a little bit here with the more races that we go into. Sub-races are just essentially different types of dwarves. Sub-races retain all traits of like their parent class, essentially the parent race. So the hill dwarf still gets the +2 to constitution and the dwarven resilience. They just get some extra stuff. So the hill dwarf gives you also a +1 to your wisdom score. You get dwarven toughness, so your max HP starting out increases by 1, and for every level after, you get an extra hit point just for being a dwarf. Mountain Dwarf. You get a +2 to your strength score, and you get Dwarven armor training, which gives you proficiency with light and medium armor. So this is going to help you if you don't feel like wearing heavy armor for any number of reasons. Plate armor takes forever to take on, take off. If some campaigns DMs will have it to where heavy armor gives you exhaustion or anything like that, just due to heat or whatever. If you don't want to wear heavy armor, you can wear light or medium armor instead. The last sub-race is the Duergar. Now, this is kind of mentioned in the player's handbook. The stat block for this is found in the monster manual, but since it's in the player's handbook in a little text box, thought I'd include that just so you have the option and you can bring it up with your DM and see if they'll let you play one. The Duergar is essentially a subterranean dwarf, or like a dark dwarf, essentially. You have Duergar resistance, so it gives you advantage on spells, against spells, illusion, and charmed or the paralyzed conditions. The drawback is that you have sunlight sensitivity. So while in sunlight, you have disadvantage on all your attack rolls and perception checks that rely on sight. So if you're not going to be in the Underdark or underground or in the mines or anything like that, it's kind of a big one. Or if it's, you're at nighttime, it doesn't really matter. They do get the ability to cast Enlarge on themselves. So for 1 minute, you magically increase your size to large, as well as anything that you're wielding or carrying, such as your weapons. Those grow with you. With that, you get double damage dice on your strength-based melee attacks, and you make strength checks or saves with advantage. If there's not enough room for you to become a large-sized creature, you just become the maximum size possible. This recharges on a short or long rest. So if short rests are kind of frequent in your campaign, you're probably going to be using Enlarge quite a bit. It's good for at least a combat encounter. You also get the ability to cast invisibility on yourself for 1 hour. You're invisible for the duration until you attack, cast a spell, use Enlarge, or break concentration. This also recharges on a short or long rest. So you can do this either once a day, or once every, if you're short, like I said, short rests are frequent in your campaign. Kind of handy. The drawback is the sunlight sensitivity, right? But definitely ask your DM and see if that's something that they're open to. Next up, we've got the elf. With the elf, you get a ability score increase of +2 to your dexterity. You're a medium-sized creature, slender builds because elves are like graceful or whatnot. You have a walking speed of 30 feet, dark vision of up to 60 feet. You gain the keen senses trait, which gives you proficiency in perception checks, a very handy skill. You get the Fey ancestry trait, which is advantage on saves against being charmed, and magically can't be put to sleep. You also get the ability to have a long rest with 4 hours instead of 8. This is the trance trait. So that's really handy. You can rest for 4 hours, get the full ability of a long rest, and you can, keep watch or anything like that while your other companions sleep. You know Common and Elvish for your languages, and there are a few sub-races here as well for the elf. First off, we'll get into the High Elf. The High Elf gives you a +1 to your intelligence score. Elf weapon training gives you a long sword, short bow, longbow proficiencies. You get to know one cantrip from the wizard class, and you use your intelligence score to as the spell casting ability for that cantrip. You also get to know one extra language of your choice. Next up is the Wood Elf. The Wood Elf gets a +1 to their wisdom. Also get elven weapon training in long sword, short sword, longbow, and short bow. You get the Fleet of Foot trait, which gives you a 35-foot walking speed instead of 30. And you get Mask of the Wild. Mask of the Wild trait lets you attempt to hide even if you're lightly obscured by natural phenomena such as heavy rain, falling snow, foliage, mist, things like that. You can kind of blend in with your environment. Even if there's no real cover, you can use the environment to your advantage. And last but not least, we have the Drow. Drow are going to be the dark elves, essentially, in Dungeons & Dragons. Again, this is something that you're going to want to take up with your DM to see if it's a playable race for you. You get a +1 to your charisma score. Superior dark vision, which gives you dark vision up to 120 feet instead of 60. Could come in handy. You also get the sunlight sensitivity, same as the Duergar. So if you're outside in sunlight, disadvantage to your attack rolls, and the perception checks that rely on sight are also at disadvantage if you're in sunlight. You do gain the Drow magic trait, which lets you know the Dancing Lights cantrip. At 3rd level, you learn Fairy Fire. It can cast it once per long rest. And at 5th level, you learn Darkness, and you can also cast that once per long rest. Charisma is used for that spell casting ability, which is what you get your ability score increased with the Drow, so you can kind of use that to your advantage there. And Drow weapon training gives you proficiency with rapiers, hand crossbows, and a sword. Next on our list is the Halfling, or the Filthy Hobbitses. Here with the Halfling, you get the +2 to your dex for your ability score increase. You're a small creature, which is about 3 feet tall and on average about 40 pounds. Your walking speed is 25 instead of 30. And you gain the Lucky trait. Lucky trait is awesome. When you roll a natural 1 on an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can just re-roll the die and take the new number. So you can essentially never crit fail, which is very good. You get the Brave trait, which is advantage on saves against being frightened. Also very handy. Frightened is very bountiful in the game of Dungeons & Dragons. Dragons have it. A lot of your higher level undead and beasts can have some sort of frightening presence or ability to roar and try to frighten you. So advantage against those saves is really good. You gain Halfling nimbleness, which you can move through the space of any creature that is a size larger than yours. Normally, if you're a medium creature and there's another medium creature in front of you and they're blocking a doorway or anything, you can't move through it because it's occupied by an enemy space. Rules as written, I believe. As a halfling, you can be like, I'm just gonna go right under you, dude, and bypass that block there and move through the next area or whatnot. For languages, you're gonna learn Common and Halfling. There are two sub races for these, so we'll jump into those. First up is Lightfoot. These are, I believe, the most common halfling, like in D&D. You get a +1 to your charisma and naturally stealthy trait. You can attempt to hide even when you're obscured only by a creature that's one size larger than you. So like the wood elf with the Mask of the Wild, as a Lightfoot halfling, the only thing that can be out in your environment, you're in the middle of a desert. The only thing out there is your barbarian against an army. You'd be like, dude, I'm gonna hide. And you hide behind your barbarian, and no one can see you. You're hiding because you're yay tall and you're big, bulky barbarians right there in the front, and they can't see you.
The two trolls look at you and they stop for long enough. They both look and go, "Take us to see trees."
I take one of their both of their big giant hands. It's like, I've seen the trees.
Give me a perception check real quick.
Okay.
At advantage.
Ooh, really? Oh, Nat 20.
Yeah! Galfast Hamhead is right behind you.
Boom! Oh my gosh! Yay!
Next up is the Stout Halfling. The Stout Halfling gives you a +1 Constitution for your ability score increase, and you have Stout Resilience, which gives you advantage on saving throws against being poisoned and poison damage, kind of similar to a dwarf. Next up, we're going to have the Human. The Human gives you an ability score increase of +1 to every ability score that you have. You are a medium-sized creature of varying builds. Just take a look, go to your local Walmart and check it out and see how many different kind of humans you see. You have a walking speed of 30 feet, you know Common, and an extra language of your choice. Now, there's no sub-race here for the Human, but you do get what's called a variant human in the player's handbook. And it's more like a lineage type of thing. Instead of the normal +1 to all of your scores, you get a +1 to 2 different scores. You gain a proficiency in whatever skill you want, and you gain a feat of your choice at first level. Pretty handy to get whatever feat you want. Great Weapon Master, Sharpshooter, Warcaster, whatever. Whatever feat you want, you can have at first level. You can start using that right out of the gate. Next on the docket is the Dragonborn. Now, Dragonborn is going to be one of the more, I wouldn't say sophisticated classes, but there's a little bit more to it, simply because of the breath weapon and your draconic ancestry. We'll get into that in a minute. For your ability score increases, you get a +2 to strength and a +1 to your charisma. You're a medium creature, a little bit bulkier than your average human. You're over 6 feet, an average of 250, but you can flavor that however you want. You get a walking speed of 30 feet, draconic ancestry. So you get to choose a color of dragon. They have a table in the handbook, but I'll go over that here right now and put it on the screen for you in just a minute. As you can see, if you choose a ancestry of a black dragon, you get an acid breath weapon. That's a 5 foot wide by 30 foot long line, and it requires a dex save from your opponent. If you're a blue dragon, you get a lightning breath weapon. That's the same as the 5 foot by 30 foot line. If you choose a brass dragon, you get a fire damage weapon. Bronze gives you lightning, and copper dragon gives you an acid one. Again, they're all 5 by 30 foot lines with dex saves. The bottom cones are going to give you a gold dragon gives you fire damage and a 15-foot cone. Green dragon gives you poison damage with the 15-foot cone, which is a constitution save instead. Red dragon gives you fire damage, 15-foot cone with the dex save. Silver dragon, cold damage, 15-foot cone with the con save. And a white dragon is the same thing as a silver, it's just metallic versus chromatic. Chromatic versus metallic are just usually associated with whether they're good dragons or evil dragons there, but depending on, like I said, on the setting, the role playing and all that stuff is going to be dependent for your DM, so you just collaborate with them and, you know, build a background for your Dragonborn. The DC that the enemy saves against for your breath weapon is 8 plus your constitution modifier plus your proficiency bonus. So as you level up, the DC will get slightly higher unless you just totally beef up constitution and kind of get it decently high out of the gate. The damage is 2d6 on a failed save and half on a pass, so not super heavy damage. It does take an action to use as well. So unless you just don't have any weapons, you'd probably rather hit with like your great axe or your rapier or whatever. But the damage does increase as you level up, I believe up to 5d6, which isn't bad, but like I said, it does take your action. You do know Draconic and Common as your languages. There are other versions of the Dragonborn in like Fizbon's Treasury of Dragons, I think, and some other sources. But like I said, this is the one out of the player's handbook. And while not great, it is very cool if you want to play a dragon. All right, next is the Gnome. The Gnome gives you a +2 to your intelligence. You're a small-sized creature, about the size of a halfling, with a walking speed of 20 feet, dark vision up to 60, and you get the Gnome Cunning trait, which is advantage on all intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saves, which is pretty nice. A lot of spells and stuff target those saves, target those ability scores, so having advantage on those saves can come in pretty handy. You also know Gnomish and Common as your languages, and there are some sub-races that we'll get into right now. The Forest Gnome gives you a +1 to your dex as well, and you get the Natural Illusionist trait, which you know the Minor Illusion cantrip. You use intelligence for the spell casting ability for this spell, and you also gain the ability to speak with small beasts. So you can communicate simple ideas with size small or smaller beasts, which would be tiny. Next up is the Rock Gnome. So the Rock Gnome gives you a +1 to your Constitution score. You get the Artificer's Lore trait, which is when you make a history check with magic items, alchemical objects, or technological devices, you double your proficiency bonus. So similar to the dwarf where you get the stone origin proficiency bonus, this gives you that same kind of deal. You also gain the Tinker trait, which you gain proficiency with artisan's tools or tinker's tools. You can spend an hour and 10 gold worth of materials to make a clockwork device, which has an AC of 5 and an HP of 1. That functions for 24 hours, and you can spend an hour to repair it to continue working, or you can just use your action to dismiss this clockwork device, and you gain the materials back. You can have up to 3 devices up at one time, and you choose from the following list. You can have it be a clockwork toy, so think of it like a wind-up toy, like the chattering teeth, which resembles a person, an animal, or beast, or monster. It moves 5 feet in a random direction when you put it on the ground. It makes a noise appropriate to the creature it represents. So if you make like a clockwork elephant or whatever, you know, you put it on the ground and moves 5 feet and it makes an elephant sound, or, you know, a dinosaur, whatever you want it to be. You have the fire starter device, which produces a miniature flame, almost like a lighter. It can be used to light a candle, a torch, or a campfire, and takes your action to use. The music box clockwork device plays a single song at a moderate volume when opened, and stops playing when the song is over or when you close the box. Next in the player's handbook is the Half-Elf. The Half-Elf gives you a +2 to charisma, and 2 other scores of your choice get a +1. So very strong out of the gate. Very popular race is the Half-Elf, simply for those really powerful ability score increases that you get to multiple scores. You're a medium-sized creature similar to a human. You have a walking speed of 30 feet and dark vision up to 60. You have the Fey Ancestry trait, which gives you advantage on saves against being charmed, and magic can't put you to sleep, just like a regular elf. And you gain the Skill Versatility trait, which gives you a proficiency in 2 skills of your choice. You also know the languages Common, Elvish, and 1 extra of your choice. Right after that is the Half-Orc. The Half-Orc gives you a +2 to your strength and a +1 to your constitution. They're similar to Dragonborns, like a little bit beefier than a human. You get a walking speed of 30 feet, dark vision up to 60. You get the Menacing trait, which gives you proficiency in the Intimidation skill. You also gain the Relentless Endurance trait. When reduced to 0 HP but not killed outright, you drop to 1 HP instead, and you can recharge this on a long rest. So as long as you take damage that doesn't double your HP, you can drop to 1 HP instead of just being dead or going down. You also gain the Savage Attacks trait. When you land a critical hit with a melee weapon, you roll an additional damage die and add it to your damage total. So depending on how your DM does crit hits in your campaign, something they'll bring up in a session 0 probably, you can kind of go over how that would work for your character. You also know the languages Common and Orc. Last but certainly not least, we have the Tiefling. The Tiefling gives you a +2 to your charisma and a +1 to your intelligence. They're a medium-sized creature, about the same as humans, but they do have a little tail, or they can if you choose to. a walking speed of 30 feet, dark vision up to 60 feet. You also gain the Hellish Resistance trait, which gives you resistance to fire damage, which is a very popular type of damage in this game. You gain resistance to it, so you take half damage whenever something hits you with fire. You also gain the Infernal Legacy trait, which you know the Thaumaturgy cantrip. At 3rd level, you learn Hellish Rebuke, that you can cast as a 2nd level once per long rest. And then at 5th level, you learn the Darkness spell, which you can also cast once per long rest. And Charisma is your spellcasting modifier for those spells. Darkness and Hellish Rebuke are really cool spells. Hellish Rebuke is a reaction you can use to attack somebody who tried to attack you. Darkness, you put magical darkness on the field and they can't see through. Unless you're a warlock and you take the invocation to see through magical darkness. Could be very helpful if you're surrounded. You also know the common and infernal languages. And that's it, everybody. That's all for the races from the player's handbook. If you'd like to learn about the other races from the different source materials, let me know in the comments below. We can start, trying to make a video on those if you are really interested. And please remember, the best class is the one that inspires you the most and the one that you want to play the most. You'll see a lot of videos on like tier lists and what's best out of the gate for like certain builds, or if you're trying to like optimize your character or like build a meta class or whatnot. But those aren't always fun, and they're not always something that interests people to play. Take ownership of like the character you want to play and just play the character you want. You can always talk to your DM about home brewing stuff, or like what if my character wants to do this or whatnot. Talk to your DM. They'll help you. They should help you, and you can build the character that you want to play, and the DM's gonna want players to play in their game. So usually if you're really excited about something, they'll try to make it happen for your character. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you. Peace.